Hello friends, my name is Pandit. I am the faculty at Savarkar IAS Study Circle and I'll be conducting your economics module with respect to UPSC. For people who are studying for various other examinations such as SSC, NDA, CDS, they also can refer to this UPSC module because UPSC generally have a vast syllabus. Alright, so once you study with respect to UPSC, other examinations become cakewalk for you. So we'll be dealing with the economics module, generally 25 to 30 sessions, and we'll try to cover all parts. Okay, so whenever I start my lecture, I try to give you the index, because once you know the index, it becomes easy for you to understand what is the syllabus we're gonna cover. Let me tell you one more thing. I have created my index based on the indexes of various books related to economics. So if you don't find this index useful, you can create your own index as well. You can modify my index, you can add various other chapters to this index. So it's completely based on you. Alright, so as you can see on your screen, there are total 8 chapters. The first chapter will be the introduction part. In introduction part, we'll be dealing with the evolution of economics as a separate subject, how money is evolved, what do you mean by money, and why do we relating currencies to dollar. All these parts will be covering in introduction session. Then we have crisis, world crisis or the Indian crisis, which are dealing with the meaning of money. For example, 1928 Great Depression, South Asian crisis gave us a broader look about what do we mean by money. Then the third chapter will be types of economies, such as state economy, capitalistic economy and mixed economy, and also one more important classification in economics, that is macroeconomics and microeconomics. So fourth and fifth chapter will be dealing with macro and micro. I have added Indian and world economics in macro and micro itself. Generally people study it separately, but I feel it comfortable, or I find it easy to understand. When we study macroeconomics, we'll be dealing with the world economics with respect to macro, and Indian economics with respect to macro, again with the same in microeconomics. Okay, so we will not be studying world economics and Indian economics separate subject or a separate chapter. Then the next chapter will be the stock market, which is a very interesting chapter. Many of you might be having various questions with related to this. And then we have the banking sector. After banking sector, we'll be dealing with the organizations, world organizations, which are very important factor for regulating various economies across the world. So let's start with our first chapter, that is the introduction part. First, we need to understand the meaning of these two words, that is economics and economy. Generally, we find these two words similar, but they have a very minute difference. Economics means theories, what we study in books. Theories which are given by various thinkers, scholars with respect to market, employment, money generation, etc. So when they give theories, we implement these theories in our economy, which is a real picture of economics. So this is a very minute difference between economics and economy. Okay, so we'll move further to the next topic which we are going to understand, that is evolution of economics as a separate subject. Previously, to give you a timeline, generally 300 to 400 BC, in that era, economics was not dealt as a separate subject, whereas it was part of section philosophy. You might be knowing various philosophers such as Aristotle, Chanakya, Xenophon. Chanakya's Arthashastra will be a very renowned book which you might be knowing. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher, but these philosophers gave various economic theories. So economic was not dealt as a separate subject in that period, whereas it was the part of philosophy section. But economics as a separate subject evolved in a later part, somewhere around in 19th century, where Adam Smith, Lionel Robbins, Marshall, these people, they gave theories specifically related to economy. We will be understanding about the theories given by these thinkers in the later half of this session. But before, let's understand from where this word economics come from. This word came from a Greek word oikonomia, meaning household management. Household management, as you might be thinking, don't have the narrow interpretation. You can think it out of the box, like any closed entity can be called as house. You are staying at a place surrounded by four walls. You can call it as a house. You are staying in India, guarded by all kind of men and women, surrounded by all four sides. Can be also called as a house. So it's a broader entity. No need to understand at a micro level like house, which means where you are staying or where people are staying. That management is economics. At a broader level also economics is happening, which is called as a household management. Aristotle also stated that oikonomia means the science of household management. During 19th century, when economics evolved as a separate subject, during that period, Adam Smith, who is also called as father of economics, he gave a theory in his book Wealth of Nation, in which what he stated, Adam Smith, okay, and the essay which he wrote is called as Wealth of Nation, in which he stated how wealth is produced and how it will be used must be the subject matter of economics. So to give you example, let's assume that I have a business which manufactures some X entity. So how I am going to produce the wealth will be from this X manufacturing unit, okay, and how I am going to use this wealth. Suppose I'll buy capital, I'll provide salary to my workers, and those workers might go outside and they'll buy some daily essential goods, so that money will be flown somewhere else, right? So this will be the cycle which will generate in the economy. So how wealth will be produced and how it will be used must be the subject matter of economics. That's what he gave the definition for economics, alright, in his book Wealth of Nation. Later on, there is one more thinker, Alfred Marshall. Alfred Marshall stated that economics does not study only the wealth generation, but it also studies the activities centering to the wealth generation. Now it was a bit ahead, but it have similar meaning to the Adam Smith's definition. But what does it mean? Activities concerning to the wealth generation, which means if suppose I have the X entity of manufacturing unit, but what activities I am doing, like suppose I need transportation, which means activities in short means the service sector. Those activities also should be taken into consideration while concerning the wealth generation. So these two thinkers have more or less the same meaning of economics, where they are concentrating towards the wealth generation. Later on, Leonard Robbins, a modern economist, gave a bit appropriate theory, okay, or a bit appropriate definition for economics, in which he stated resources are scarce, but how do we use these resources to produce the valuable commodity will be the objective of economic study. It looks a bit fair, right? Because as you know, the resources are always scarce, population is always increasing. So how do we use these resources to provide commodity to these unlimited population, right? You might be knowing also this Buddhist theory, in which is stated human desire is unlimited, right? But resources are scarce, right? So that's why in which the money comes as a medium of exchange, right? So that's why we call Leonard Robbins as a modern economist. Why? Because he gave a most appropriate definition which give a complete justice to economic studies. Alright, so now as you understood how this economics as a separate subject got evolved, now let's go to the second topic of introduction session, that is evolution of money. You know, from history we have three forms of money, right? The first will be barter system, second will be coinage, and third will be the paper currency, which is the latest one, right? So first let's understand the barter system, and then we'll go ahead to coinage and then paper currency, the evolution of paper currency. All right. So from Harappan period, you might have studied in history, Harappan and various other civilizations, barter system was most prevalent method for transfer of goods. For the first time, barter system recorded in Egyptian civilization, which is also called as Mesopotamian civilization. So there we have first evidence of barter system. As I told you last time, there were various thinkers and philosophers of Aristotle, Chanakya and Xenophon who gave economic theories, in which Aristotle's one theory which states that if the market exchange, understanding the market exchange, which means if I want something, I need to exchange something with you, right? This is what is called as barter system. I'll give you one thing, you'll give me another thing in replacement of that particular entity, right? So Aristotle stated, if barter system is the market exchange, then people try to satisfy their natural needs. Getting the point? If barter system is the market exchange, then people try to satisfy their natural needs. Why? You need to understand one more concept to understand this statement, because barter system have double coincidence of want. Double coincidence of wants. Now what do you mean by this word, which is a very important thing, okay, which is one of the characteristic of barter system. Let's have an example to understand this double coincidence of want. Suppose I require wheat and I have rice in replacement for that particular wheat entity, right? So I need to find someone who require rice and also he have wheat in exchange of that. So this concept is called as double coincidence of want, which is a kind of coincidence, right? So that's the reason why we call it as a double coincidence of want. We need to satisfy this in a barter system. So now let's come back to the theory of Aristotle, which stated if barter system is the market exchange, people try to satisfy their natural needs. So let's imagine the current scenario where if you have money in your pocket, then you can buy anything. If you don't require, still you can buy, right? So you are not satisfying your natural need, right? You just have money, that's the reason why you are purchasing that particular commodity. So it's not your natural need. But if it would be a barter system, you might be satisfying your natural need and you won't be buying unnecessary commodity. In barter system, there were valuable commodities as well, like how we have currently gold, platinum, diamond. Likewise, there used to be cattle and wheat or grain, any type of grain, were the valuable commodities during that period in barter system. Later on, we shifted to coinage. Somewhere around 600 BC, we recorded the first coinage or the first coin sample in Lydian's dynasty. Lydians is the Asia Minor kingdom. Asia Minor, which means current Turkey, that Turkey area, is we used to call it as Asia Minor during that period. So this Lydian's dynasty came out with the first gold coin in 600 BC, that is the Iron Age period. If you can study the history period, that is 1000 to 500 BC period is called as the Iron Age period, because the iron was developed in this era or in this period. So we call it as the Iron Age period. So this coinage was started from these Lydians. Later on, various other kingdoms adopted this method instead of barter system, and what we used to use as a coin, that is a gold, silver, which we also called as a precious metals. So we started using them later on, and we shifted to the coinage period after 600 BC. In history, in Indian history as well, like Gupta king, and later on Satavahanas and various other kingdoms have started using this coinage for the daily exchange for the commodities, where they used to use precious metals. Later on, we'll be shifting towards the paper currency, which is a bit important part because that's the thing what we are using at this moment as the medium of exchange, was done by paper currency. Alright, and I also told you about one of the theory of Aristotle in which he stated if market exchange is in the form of barter system, people try to satisfy their natural needs. You might be remembering, we discussed this theory, right? So when paper currency evolved, it formed or it is recorded for the first time in China during 960 AD. Then Marco Polo, you might have heard this name many times in history because he was a traveler and he gave various historical evidence which are helpful for us today to understand the contemporary world. Okay. So Marco Polo, when traveled to China, he understood about this paper currency and he gave this idea in Europe, where they also implemented the same type of paper currency. After the idea of paper currency in 960 AD, still many countries have not adopted this form of currency till 1600 or 1700 AD because it was not reliable source. They were not understanding how paper currency will work, how we can assign value to that currency. So we were still using the coinage system around 1600 to 1700 AD. But later on, US Treasury Secretary Salmon Chase formed in 1862. They created $5, $10 and $20 notes. They printed these notes during 1862. And what they did, they assigned value of this dollar with respect to gold. During 1900, they came out with Gold Standardization Act or Gold Standard Act, in which they assigned value of dollar to gold. This is the first step towards evolution of paper currency or to the understanding how paper currency will work in future. And they decided value of gold to $20.67 is equal to 1 ounce. Now 1 ounce you can understand in grams, that is 28.38 grams. So 28.38 grams of gold is equal to $20.67 during 1862 to 1900 period. So if suppose, for your understanding, suppose US have 3 ounce of gold, then in market they must have the currency which is equated to somewhere around $60. Understanding, $20 is 1 ounce, that's what they are stating. So 3 ounce if the gold US have, then in market currency must be $60. That's what the understanding, right? So they started working on this principle. Later on, Europe also adopted the same approach and they pegged their currency to gold. But during the phase of 1914 to 1919 World War I, US and Europe printed paper currency irrespective of their gold reserves, due to which these countries were the most affected ones due to Great Depression of 1928, which we are going to study in our upcoming sessions. After the first session, we are going to study the crisis related to money, in which we will be discussing about Great Depression and South Asian crisis, which gave a broader understanding to our concept about money. Alright, so due to 1919, this hyperinflation came in the place because more money was there in the market, irrespective of the gold reserves. So this hyperinflationary conditions, what US government did, they increased the value of gold. To tackle this situation, US government came out with an act known as Gold Reserve Act, in which they stated no private holding of gold must take place instead of or without a license. So it increased the value of gold, that is $35 is equal to 1 ounce. Now as the value of gold increased $35 1 ounce, which means more dollar is in the market. Getting the point? Or just understand it by a simple example. suppose a gold reserve is stationary. Gold reserve is stationary. That is, suppose we have 100 ounce of gold. 100 ounce of gold, and money in the market is $100. Right? So 1 ounce of gold will become $1. Clear? Now 100 ounce of gold and dollar in the market increases to, this is the first condition. Second condition, 100 ounce gold and $200 in the market. Now what will happen? Now 1 ounce will become $2. The same thing is happening. $20 for 1 ounce, $35 for 1 ounce, which means more dollars were in the market. To tackle this situation, they increased the value of gold. So this happened during the period of 1934. By that time, US created restrictions for gold holding because their gold reserves were diminishing by that time. So they came out with this act. By the end of 1945, the period in which World War II ended, US had highest amount of gold reserves. So US pegged their currency, or US pegged their dollars to gold, and other countries pegged their currencies to US dollar because it was easy way in the international market for trading. So US dollar became dominant in international market as they were having more gold reserves. But if you will understand, you might be having one more question, that why they are connecting their currencies to gold? Because gold was treated as the most valuable commodity by that time. But later on, or you can think in the current period, we don't have that value of gold as we used to have in the period of 1950s or 40s with respect to our paper currency. Currently, you can think in this manner that money is related with our resources. Okay, so as many as resources or as many as manufacturing units in current scenario are there in our nation will be relating with our money or our paper currency. So the final output is done by manufacturing unit. The final good is produced by manufacturing unit. This final good is related with the resources. So our money is related with the total resources what we have in our nation. So this Gold Standard Act does not become valid in the current scenario. Later on, Bretton Woods Conference is the very important step towards formalizing gold and currency, or relation of gold and currency. That is done in Bretton Woods Conference. Bretton Woods Conference, which took place in the period of 1945 after the end of World War II, in which all nations they agreed for relation of their currency to gold. As US had most of the gold reserves, so they related their currency to dollar. Now after this scenario, many countries they started buying gold from US at that current value, that is $38 for 1 ounce, and people started buying gold reserves from US for $38. Now as gold reserves will start, as this will happen, as countries will start buying gold from US, the US gold reserve will start diminishing and they will start moving from their country to another country, right? So to understand this phase, suppose US had 100 ounce of gold in 1945, and suppose dollar in the market again $100. Okay, so 1 ounce will become $1. Okay, now what countries will start doing? Countries will start buying gold for $1, 1 ounce from US. Then what will happen? US will get $1, but gold reserve will become minus 1 ounce, which means dollars will be more in the market as compared to gold reserves. Correct? So dollar value will start diminishing. So understand why I am saying the dollar value will diminish, because now, as I told you, 100 ounce of gold, if country bought 1 ounce of gold, US will have 99 ounce of gold left, and dollar in the market will become $101. So when we'll divide 99 to 101, will give us 0.99 per ounce per dollar, means 0.99 per dollar. Okay, so countries will start getting gold in a cheaper and cheaper price, because US gold reserve is diminishing, whereas they are having more and more money in their market. So US understood this problem because they had 19.5 billion gold reserves by the time of 1960, which reduced down to 14.5 billion reserves during 1970 period. So Nixon, he decoupled gold from dollar. So when gold went into the free market, whereas it does not have any relationship with dollar, the value of gold rose to $124 per ounce. So countries won't be paying $124 because they don't have $124 with them, because the trade was not happening at that level that countries' foreign reserve in dollar will be at 124 and they'll be spending $124 for a gold instead of buying some another entity. So other entities or other commodities started getting more and more value than gold. That's the reason why we went into the free market, and currently, as I told you at the last time, that current money or current paper currency is related completely with the resources or your final goods. By this, I hope you might have understood how paper currency evolved and how we gave value to paper currency in the initial stage. Let's move to next topic, that is value of dollar. You know, in the current scenario, $1 is equal to 70 rupees or 64 rupees, which fluctuates on day-to-day basis. How do we define this value? Well, $1 is equal to 64, $1 is equal to 70, $1 is equal to 75. How do we decide this value? To understand, let's take an example again. Suppose in India, we have $100 in our foreign reserves, and money in the circulation, which is most probably related to gold or resources what we have, or the manufacturing units what we have, or the technological units what we have. Based on that, the money in the market is 1000. Obviously our dollar value, the foreign reserve value is or foreign reserve capacity is less with respect to our money in the market. That's the reason why the value of dollar is more. So suppose we have 1000 rupees in the market, $100 as a foreign currency or foreign reserves with government. So when we divide 1000 to 100, we get 10 rupees. $1 will be equal to 10 rupees in Indian market if we have 1000 rupees in the market. Then now this is the first scenario. Let's understand one more scenario where, due to our exports or any other activity, our foreign reserve in dollar increased, which became $200. Now money in the circulation is still 1000 rupees. Alright, so now what will be the value of dollar? 1000 divided by 200 will give us 5 rupees, which means $1 is equal to 5 rupees. This means that value of rupees is appreciated. Value of rupees is increased. Why? Because previously you have to pay 10 rupees to get $1. Now you are paying 5 rupees for $1, which means value of rupees in Indian market is increasing as we are having more and more foreign reserves. As we have more and more foreign reserve, what does it state? Which means that India is exporting more and more commodities. As India is exporting more and more commodities, which means they have more and more manufacturing units. They have more and more manufacturing units, which also means that they have a technological advancement. So these factors are related with the appreciation and depreciation of currency. Now this is the scenario of appreciation of currency. Now let's have a third example in which our dollar value is decreased. Now we have $100 over here, which decreased down to $50, and money in the market is 1000 rupees. Okay. Now this dollar will be reduced due to various other factors, such as import. If India is buying something from US, UK, Europe, any other nation, because dollar is the most accepted currency in international market for trade. So India is buying something, so they'll be paying in dollars. So we have $50 and currency in circulation will be 1000. So what will happen? 1000 divided by 50 will give you 20 rupees. Now $1 value became 20, which means the Indian currency value is devaluated. Alright. What is happening over here? Here value is getting appreciated. Here value is getting devaluated. So devaluation and appreciation of value is completely related with the foreign reserves what we have. Please remember this concept what we have studied just now, that is the value of dollar, because we'll be needing this concept in upcoming chapters, that is the crisis, various crises which happened in US or in the world. So we require this concept value of dollar because this is the root cause of all crises across the world. Okay, now the fourth and last topic of introduction session is the type of money. This concept is bit related with the Indian economics. As I told you in the introduction session or the first session of our economics, where I discussed index with you, I'll be dealing with Indian economics and world economics in that particular or the respective chapter. So in this introduction session, when we are discussing about money, let's discuss the type of money what we have in India, which is one of the quantitative, or from these terms we understand what type of money is there in the market. So there are total 5 types of money, that is M0, M1, M2, M3 and M4. Before this, let's understand one more term which is called as liquidity. Liquidity in economics means that suppose I have gold with me, will be more liquid part. Suppose if I have cash in my hand, will be the more liquid, which means that what amount of money or what type of money you have in your hand when you go in the market can be sold or can be used for getting any kind of stuff will have more liquidity. So for example, cash in your hand will be the more liquid form. Demand deposits or your saving account in your bank will be a next liquidity form or the next more liquid form. Then your gold reserves will move more ahead because to encash that gold, you have to go through a big procedure, right? So it will move in the later part of a liquidity. So that's what we call liquidity, where the part or the type of money what you have in your hand will be useful for you to buy any kind of stuff from the market. So that's what we call liquidity. Now first understand M0. M0 is also called as reserve money. What comes into M0 is that currency in circulation plus bankers deposit in RBI, Reserve Bank of India, bankers deposit, which means if you have SBI Bank, Bank of Baroda or all other banks, all banks, they deposit some part of their money to RBI for the safer side. Alright, so whatever deposit they make, we'll be understanding this bankers deposit in our banking section separately. But for current understanding, just understand whatever amount bank is providing to RBI for their safety is called as bankers deposit in RBI, plus other deposits in RBI. If any other company or any other manufacturing unit or any private entity, if is doing some deposits in RBI, will also be counted as M0 or reserve money. Okay, then the next one is M1, which is also called as narrow money. In narrow money, what will come? Cash or currency in circulation plus demand deposits of bank. Now demand deposit will be dealing separately again in banking sector, but for this current section's understanding, demand deposit means your saving account. If you have current account or your fixed deposit, you can't be taking out or you can't be withdrawing money that easily. As easily you can withdraw money from your demand account or your saving account. That's the reason it will be more liquid form. right, as compared to time deposits, because it will have less liquidity. You have to go through a long procedure to get that cash from bank, whereas demand deposit you can withdraw any point of time, right, because you can't be paying from your fixed deposit to a fixed deposit ATM card to petrol pump or to restaurants, but you can pay from your demand deposit ATM card to any place. That's the reason it have more liquidity. Then the third type is M2, which means M1 plus post office saving. M1, which means cash in circulation or currency in circulation, plus demand deposits of bank, demand deposit which means the saving account, plus post office saving. Then the fourth one, M3, which is also called as broad money. In M3 we have M1 plus time deposits. Now time deposits, which means fixed deposits or recurring deposit what we have in banks, will be again dealing with this fixed deposit and recurring deposit, which are the part of time deposits in the banking sector. So M1, which means again currency in circulation plus demand deposit of bank and time deposits. Here the post office saving is not added. Now again last one, the fifth type, that is the money M4, in which we have M3, which means M1 and time deposit plus post office saving. Okay, so these are the 5 types of money. Now if I can tell you to formulate them on the liquidity pattern, I can tell M1, we can't be calculating M0 as liquidity part because it's the reserve money. So we can't be thinking about the liquidity of M0. So M1 is more liquid than M2, is more liquid than M3, is more liquid than M4. Why? Because M1, currency in your hand which have more value, you can easily buy any stuff with this money. M2 is lesser liquid than M1 but is more liquid than M3, and M3 is lesser liquid than M2 but is more liquid than M4, right? With this we have completed our first chapter of economics, that is Introduction to Economics, in which we covered how economics evolved as a separate subject, evolution of money, in which we discussed barter system, coinage and paper currency, then value of dollar, and later on type of monies. So Great Depression of 1929, we are going to tackle this topic in 3 phases: history, the condition of Great Depression, that is 1929 phase, and the future or conclusion of 1929 Great Depression. So let's start with the first phase, that is history. Now whenever you will see any crisis, it won't be the outcome of a small period like a week or a month or a year. It have long lasting effects and also long lasting causes. So first we'll understand the history now. In history we'll be covering 6 topics. Now the first will be World War I phase. In history you will be studying World War I phase, that is 1914 to 1919, in which America, Britain, they emerged as the global powers because these countries were the least affected countries. So America thought they will be having more and more power to their dollar, hence they can be ruling the world. They thought this because of 2 factors. First, USA was the least affected country in World War I because they entered in World War I in the later phase, that is 1917 and 1918 phase, and this country was least affected due to World War I. That's the first factor. Secondly, Treaty of Versailles, which you will be studying in World War I separately in the history part, but just to understand, Treaty of Versailles thrown Germany into a big loan amount which they have to pay to allied powers such as USA, Britain and Japan. So USA was going to get ample amount of money from Germany, so they thought they'll be leading in world economic race. Now let's understand the second factor, that is the overproduction. By that time in 1920, USA's population was somewhere around 106 million. Agriculture and industries were also in a boom phase. You also will be studying Industrial Revolution history in the phase of 19th century or early 19th century. Also, from 1800 period, agricultural commodities also started getting overproduction. Malthusian theory with respect to agriculture and population is a renowned theory during the 19th century, in which he stated agricultural commodities are increasing in arithmetic progression. Arithmetic progression, just to understand 1, 2, 3, 4, which have the common difference, or if you want to take any other example like 2, 4, 6, 8, this is called as arithmetic progression. But whereas population is increasing in geometric progression. Geometric progression means 1, 2, 2 to the 4, 4 to the 8, 8 to the 16, 16 to the 32. So this is the increase in population. So that's what Malthus stated. So population is increasing in geometric progression, agriculture is increasing in arithmetic progression. So he stated that in future people might not be getting ample amount of food and they'll be dying due to poverty and hunger, which became wrong in future because agricultural activities and agricultural technologies boomed in 18th century and 19th century due to invention of various things such as tractor got invented, irrigation facilities developed, fertilizers became available to common man. So agricultural boom in this phase. So overproduction of agricultural product, industrial products were also getting overproduced with respect to the population of USA. So this was also one more factor which will lead into the Great Depression of 1929. Now let's move to third factor, that is credit policy. After World War I, as I told you, US thought they'll be the leading in all economies across the world. So, and also there was overproduction of commodities such as agricultural goods as well as industrial goods. So US government came out with a policy that is buy now, pay later. Because there was a lot of commodities in the market, demand was not there with respect to their supply. So they had to give these commodities to people. So you can buy now and pay later, like a credit card, how we are using current scenario. So people thought they can buy as many commodities as they can in the current period, and let's see when they can pay. Whenever they'll get money, they'll pay back for those commodities. So this will also lead again in Great Depression of 1929, just to make sure. Then the next factor is Liberty bonds. These bonds USA came out when they were in the World War I phase. Now we'll be dealing with bonds, stock market separately in our later sessions of economics. But I'll just give you a hint, and whatever we require, the content what we require to understand the Great Depression, I'll let you know about that content, and we won't be discussing these topics in detail about bonds and stock market. Alright, so just to make you understand, bonds mean a paper which is given by government to public, and government will be providing some kind of interest on those amount. So suppose government issued a bond of 100 rupees and government is stating they will give you interest of 8%. So whenever you will settle the bond or whenever the bond will get mature means the period of that bond gets over. That means the maturity period. So whenever that bond you will sell or whenever the bond gets mature, you might be getting 108 rupees. Again, this is the hypothetical condition. It's not always you will be getting 108 rupees. As you always hear, mutual funds are always subject to market risk, right? Now first understand why US government issued these Liberty bonds. US government stated the money raised by this bond will be used in World War I and they'll be providing interest on those bonds. Now again, one more concept which is related to stock market. government bonds always have higher value or higher trust value, because people think government will never lose their money, and whatever happens, government will return the amount paid by the people. So government bonds in the market will always have high trust value. A government won't run away like Vijay Mallya, right? If government run away, still another government will come and they'll think about the social security of people and they'll return back the money if the money is taken away by another government. So these liberty bonds were purchased by many people in USA, and they started getting faith or trust on these bond system, where they'll be start investing and they'll be getting return on that investment. It's the easy money, right? If you are investing somewhere, your money is safe and also you are getting interest on that money, will be a good earning for you. That's what people thought, and they started getting more and more bonds. Now let's understand the fifth cause, that is non-regulated companies issuing bonds. Now as US government started issuing bond and they saw the response how people is providing to these bond system, they also started issuing various bonds of their company. Also they started issuing shares in lower price. Now again, as I told you, in share market we'll be discussing about these shares, how we buy shares, but just to understand and to have a clarity to understand the Great Depression, in share market, if I have a company which manufactures the X entity, I require some capital. Suppose I require capital of 100 rupees. I issue share of 10 rupees, 10 shares. People will buy these shares 10 rupees. I'll get a capital of 100 rupees. I invest that capital somewhere. I'll multiply this capital. I'll provide salary to my workers, and whatever profit I'll get from that profit, I'll give some amount or some dividend to people whosoever have invested or whosoever have taken my shares. This is a simplistic way. We'll be discussing in detail in share market chapter. Alright. So this is what happened. Companies whose share might have of 100 rupees, they started issuing for 50 rupees. So this created golden opportunity for people. Why? Because they are getting bonds or shares in a much cheaper price, and it's very good time for them to earn money. So people started buying shares on a huge quantity. When people started buying shares, companies understood that people have faith on share market and they are going to invest in our share or in our bonds, and we will be keep on getting capital for our business. So that's what the assumption was created for industrialists, right? But it's not correct, because share value is decided by demand and supply. As there was no regulatory body in US at that time, which was one of the reasons for the creation of crisis. So ultimate the point is that non-regulated companies started issuing bonds. Many companies entered into the market for doing this business. So to explain you quickly demand and supply of share value, if more and more people are buying shares, which means there is a huge demand for share, right? If there is a huge demand for share, the prices must go up, whereas the prices were going down and down. Alright, so prices were not regulated with the proper authority. Alright, so the next point for causes will be the roaring 20s. Just remember, these non-regulated companies issuing bond, will be dealing with this point in the phase part where the crisis took place, and later on in the conclusion part as well. Alright, then the next point is roaring 20s. During the period, this roaring 20s, because this 20s period, 1920s to 1929 period, US economic growth doubled. Now economic growth doubled, which means the final output which is coming in the economy, final output, to give you example, if suppose agriculture is producing wheat, till the time wheat is not converted into a final good, which means wheat can be used to create a bread which will be consumed finally. It can be used to create a flour, wheat flour, which will be again consumed finally, right? So this is called as final output. So final output is called as GDP, gross product. So US gross product doubled by this time, by 1920s. Alright, let's have another example. Suppose steel is a commodity, but when this steel will be used into a manufacturing unit for creating bikes, cars or any automobile, it will generate a value. So the final output will be bikes and cars. Alright. Hence this final output is called as a gross output or total output. So in this period of 1920 to 1929, US's gross output doubled. It's obvious, right? Due to overproduction, agricultural commodities and industry, right? Due to various technological inventions and technological advancement, right? So these are the 6 causes which will lead us into a Great Depression. Okay, so I hope you understood these causes. Now let's move to the second phase, that is the Great Depression phase. Crisis phase will be understanding in 7 parts. The first is no monetary policy. As we discussed in causes, that is many companies, unlisted companies came into the market and started issuing shares for lower and lower price as people's trust was there, right? So for these companies, government never implemented any policy so as government can have checks on these companies, how they are issuing shares, how these companies are working, or how these companies are using the money given by public. So no regulation was there in place for these companies, or government was not interfering in their affairs. So this was one more problem for crisis happening. Okay, the second is internal corruption increased in this phase. As capitalistic people or industrialists were benefited by these government policies, they were providing money to government for not implementing any policies against them. So in government also corruption started increasing on day-to-day basis in USA by that time. So due to these conditions, prices in the market started increasing for various other commodities. As government's check was not there and industrialists, whatever price they'll keep, people will have to buy on that price, right? So due to this, in the election 1928, Herbert Hoover, the new president, came and he came out with a slogan that is chicken in every pot, because chicken was very expensive at that time. So he gave assurance to people that I'll provide chicken to everyone. On this slogan, he won the election and he became the president. But still, he also failed to restrict this crisis at 1929. Okay. There is also a story in which people who were not having jobs or who were residing on roads, they started building villages made out of cardboard and named them as the Hoover Villages, on the name of Herbert Hoover, because he did not complete his promise, that is chicken in every pot, and he could not able to curtail this inflation or rise in price. Okay, so the next and the backbone or the very important striking point for happening this 1929 Great Depression, that is selling of bonds and shares. Due to these factors and also the factors and the causes which I discussed with you in the previous cause and effect phase, people started losing faith on government, on companies, and they thought that their money is not safe in banks as well as in the share market, as the share market and companies were not regulated by government and government's control was not there. So what people started doing, they started withdrawing their money from bonds, from share market and from banking sector, because there was no faith on these institutions. As people started withdrawing the money from these institutions went out into a bank run or run condition. Bank run condition, which happened in 1930 also. This condition means that if you have account in a bank and if all people starts withdrawing money from bank won't have any capital in their hand to invest in another activities. If banks won't invest in another activities, they won't be able to provide salaries to their employees, they won't be able to provide loans to needy people, so economy won't function. This is what is called as run condition. So before this 29 October 1929, which is also called as a Black Tuesday, because on this day share market collapsed, before a week ago people started withdrawing their money from shares in which they invested. Now have an example. Suppose I have business, I have issued 10 shares, I have 100 rupees in my hand, but I'll be investing this amount somewhere else as I want to do the business, right? So if people start asking for money back, then I can't give them money, I can't give their all money at the same time because I have invested it somewhere, right? So when people started selling on a huge quantity, at a point company declared them as bankrupt and they were able to return money of only few people, and many people's money which was invested in share market was not returned, okay, as companies declared themselves as bankrupt. So their money went into share market and now they don't have any penny in their hand for their future expenses. Alright, now as share market collapsed and people started selling bonds, obviously there will be one more condition in the economy which is called as unemployment. Right? Why unemployment? Because companies won't have money to provide salary to people. So they'll start removing workers and employees from their company as they won't be having money to pay them. Right? So approximately 25% US population became unemployed in this phase of Great Depression. Now one more factor, the last point, that is a dust bowl. Dust bowl means from farmland which was overproducing in the previous phase, but still they were not having money to harvest it, there were no people to buy their goods, so they were not feeling that whatever produced they have did will get them a value in the market. So they stopped producing the agricultural commodities, and due to which they also started migrating to cities for new jobs. Due to which again one more condition happened, US agricultural produce reduced to its half. Now you will be understanding why we are calling this as a Great Depression, because depression is a phase in which people feel like they'll suicide. From Wall Street market, from various buildings, people committed suicide. Okay, people died due to hunger, and the condition was very scarce in US during that period. Now a last factor in this present scenario, as all these things happened, US stock market went down, US population and US economy and US as a nation collapsed due to all these factors. But why other countries suffered? That's the basic question comes into our mind. Because whenever US suffers, other nations also suffer. Now the reason for that is that many renowned politicians like Winston Churchill also, they also invested in US share market because it's a trustworthy place. US is always a trustworthy place for investment due to the technological advancement. Alright, so many nations they invested, many entrepreneurs from nations they invested their money in US stock market. When US stock market collapsed, their money is also gone into this stock market. Now let's move to third phase or post-crisis condition, that is the conclusion part. The first thing, whenever such kind of crisis take place, political parties get advantage. In USA, we have two important political parties. That is, one is Republican and another is Democratic. Current President Donald Trump is from Republican Party, whereas the previous President Obama was from Democratic Party. The same way, Herbert Hoover, who was the president in 1928, he was from Republican Party. Then later on, when election took place in 1932, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Democratic president, Democratic Party leader, became the president of USA. And he came out with a new policy which is called as a New Deal policy. In this New Deal policy, they generally took care of two things. By this time in USA, 15 million people were unemployed. Alright, so Work Progress Administration, this program, they guaranteed 8.5 billion jobs to people, and they started creating employment in the market. Now understand one more thing, whenever such crisis take place, any government will try to uplift the industrialist or business entities, and by providing money to them and also to banking sector. You might be knowing about the NPA condition, non-performing asset condition, which took place in India, where banking sector was diminishing during 2015 phase, the current phase. Government also provided money to banks so as they can uplift and they can start doing their normal activities. So government provide money to these companies in the later part once the money from market is taken out. Alright, so VPA program guaranteed 8.5 billion jobs. And the second thing, in USA there was no Social Security Act. People were not knowing about share market, they have not insured themselves, they have not insured their shares, or they have not even insured their life or accidental deaths. Alright, so Social Security Act provided insurance to people so that they can get some social security. If something goes wrong, they can have insurance sector to go and ask and get their money back. Alright, so these are two important things what New Deal policy did. Also, New Deal policy implemented the monetary policy of the economy. We discussed in cause part of this Great Depression, where there was no monetary policy take place, where there was no monetary policy in a place. Alright, due to which many countries, they were many companies, they were issuing their shares based on their assumptions. So no government intervention was there. Also, John Maynard Keynes, he was the British economist. He suggested that without government intervention, no market must work. If you give market completely in the hands of industrialist or business entity, they might ruin the market and you might go again into the crisis in future. So government must regulate some basic norms so as these people must not become the dictator of market. So US implemented monetary policy, that's the third thing. And lastly, the World War II, this Great Depression lasted, or this phase lasted for a decade, that is 10 years. Okay, so in 1941, when Japan attacked US on Pearl Harbor, US went into the war, World War II, so they required production. So due to this reason, again various production units started giving jobs to people. And for your understanding, this Great Depression phase lasted in US till 1945, till the end of World War II. Alright, so I hope you understood the cause, the crisis condition and the conclusion part, which we have discussed from 1920s to 1945. This is how Great Depression took place and why other countries affected due to this Great Depression. As I told you in the previous session, that where we discussed about money. The value of money or the understanding about the paper currency evolved with the specific timeline. So this is the first timeline where we understood about share market and how government intervention must be there so as such kind of crisis must not take place in future. But still US in future also many crises took place which affected the globe, which we're going to discuss in later parts also. So I hope you understood this Great Depression of 1929. In the later part we're going to cover Asian crisis of 1997, which gave us a broader look about money and how various currencies across world related with dollar, which we discussed in second module also, gave us a new idea or a new dimension in that respect. Alright, so by that time stay tuned. Let's start with the Asian crisis. As we started in the previous session, we'll be understanding about how this crisis took place, what are the reasons for this crisis to happen, and how they came out. So let's start. There are three kinds of nations in the world based on their economies. The first one, developed nations like USA, UK, Russia, Germany. The second one is developing nations like India, China, Brazil, etc. And the third one is least developed nations like various nations in African continent, Syria, Yemen, etc. So this South Asian crisis took place in the region of South Asia, that is Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, and East Asia, that is Japan, and also some part of China. So we're going to understand this crisis based on these factors. Most affected nations in these crises is Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea. Right? These nations are the developing nations. Now why I'm discussing this? Because developing nations always attract a lot of investment, because there is a scope of investment as these nations are developing in their format. So you investors are always trying to invest their amount or their money in these developing nations due to high scope of returns. Now to understand history of their economy, these countries, South Asian countries, were growing at a rate of 9% from 1980 to 1990, 1997, somewhere around, because this crisis took place in the year of 1997. Okay, so what do you mean by growth rate? Suppose if you understand 100 rupees was their country's GDP in the year suppose X, and if this country is growing at the rate of 9%, which means they will add up in the succeeding year 9 rupees. Alright, so next year again 9%, again 9% of 109. This is what we called as a growth rate of 9%. So they had a constant growth rate from 1890 to 1990. So investors always thought that this is an ideal place for their investment. We require one more concept to understand this crisis, that is devaluation and appreciation of currency, which we already discussed in our module 2, but we'll revise that concept quickly. These are the respective currency of these nations: Thailand baht, Indonesian rupiah, South Korean won. Okay, like Indian rupees and US dollar the same way. Alright. So we'll quickly revise the devaluation and appreciation of currency. Now, as I told you last time, the amount of foreign reserves in dollar what that particular nation have with respect to the currency in circulation will be creating their value to dollar, right? Just understand now. Suppose $100 are there in forex, we also called as foreign reserves of that particular nation, and currency in circulation is 1000 whatever baht, rupiah or one. Okay, so we'll assume baht. 1000 baht is in the market, which is printed by the Thailand government, and $100 is with them, which came by investment. When investors will come, they'll be investing in dollars. So $100 came in the form of $100 came in the form of investment. So they have $100. So when we'll divide 1000 with 100, we'll be getting 10 baht is equal to $1. Assume this is the condition 1. Second condition, now if dollar amount investment came, more investment came in Thailand, okay, so dollar became 200, dollar became $200. This is the second condition, okay. So dollar became 200, currency in circulation again 100 baht. So what will happen? 1000 divided by 200 will give us 5, which means now 5 baht is equal to $1. Now what happened? Currency appreciated or depreciated? Here we used to get 10, we had to pay 10 baht to get $1. Now we had to pay 5 baht to get $1, which means currency is appreciated. Thailand currency is appreciated. We have to pay less Thailand currency to get $1, which means currency is getting appreciated. Now understand the third scenario. In second scenario, we assume $100 became $200. Now if investors who have invested in the market, they are removing their money or taking back their money from the market, and investment went down to $50. Okay, again currency in circulation, we are assuming it as a stationary 1000 baht. Okay, so what will happen now? 1000 divided by 50 will give us 20. So now you have to pay 20 baht for $1. Alright, so what is happening? Currency is getting devaluated. We have to pay more amount to get $1. So here currency is getting devaluated, here currency is getting appreciated. Okay, this we already discussed in second module, but just to revise it, I'm explaining you this concept again because we require this concept for understanding the South Asian crisis. I hope you understood this devaluation and appreciation of currency. We'll be moving ahead with two major concepts which will be driving the future economies, that is floating exchange rate and fixed exchange rate. Okay, if you understand these two terminologies, then South Asian crisis will be very easy to understand. Now floating exchange rate. Suppose in a country $100 investment is there, 1000 baht is the amount which is in the market circulated by government based on their resources, their technology, their manufacturing units. Alright, so what will happen? 1000 divided by 100 will give us 10 baht for $1. Alright, now if more investment comes, this is the first scenario, suppose you understand. Then second one, if more investment comes, what will happen? The currency will appreciate or depreciate as we discussed previously. Now suppose if the more investment comes, $200, 1000 baht as we did previously, 5 baht will be $1, right? So currency is getting appreciated. So this is what we call it as a floating exchange rate, because the exchange rate is changing based on the investment. Alright, now fixed exchange rate. Again, this condition is same, the first condition where $100, 1000 baht, 10 baht we have to pay for getting $1. Now what will happen? Now understand the second condition. If $200 is coming, 1000 baht is there, the currency is getting appreciated, and 5 baht for $1. If country like Thailand, if they want to keep the exchange rate to 10 baht $1, then what they have to do? They have to put plus 1000 baht in the market to keep exchange rate similar to the previous one, like 10 baht to $1 in this condition, right? So what they will do, the currency in circulation for Thailand will become 2000 baht, $200 came, like $100 added in the investment, so $200, currency in circulation 2000 baht, so exchange rate will become 2000 divided by 200 will give us 10 baht is equal to $1, which is similar to the previous one, which is called as fixed exchange rate. Based on your investment in dollar, you will increase currency in circulation for trying to keep the exchange rate fixed as it was before. This is the basic difference between floating exchange rate and fixed exchange rate. This is where the complete crisis lies. Okay. Now understand. As I told you previously, Thailand was a developing country. What will happen? The investors were trying to invest in Thailand as they were getting more and more returns. So due to which more and more investors started rushing towards Thailand. They invested most of their amount in Thailand. Due to which Thailand foreign reserves, that is the dollar, that foreign reserves increased. Alright. Now as these foreign reserves increase, Thailand currency have to appreciate like this way. If dollar increased, currency in circulation same, then dollar Thailand value must appreciate, right? But what Thailand did, or these South Asian nations, what they did, they floated the currency of their respective nation in the same amount as the dollar is coming in the market. Like they tried to keep the fixed exchange rate. They floated the same amount with respect to dollar and with respect to their currency into the market, so as the exchange rate will remain constant. Like how in $200 investment came, they added 1000 baht. They added 1000 baht, so as 10 baht will again become to $1. Now why they do this? Because understand, if I am the investor, I am investing in Thailand, I have invested my $100 and that dollar value, $100, if 10 baht is the value for dollar, then what will happen? I'll be getting 1000 baht, right? $100, 1000 baht when I invested. Now if more and more investment is coming, the value will be appreciating. If value will appreciate, previously I was getting for $1 10 baht, now I'll be getting for $1 5 baht. So when I invested for $100, my Thailand value was 1000 baht, but as the currency started getting appreciated, so my $100 I'll be getting 500 baht. So I'll have loss. I'll be facing loss as an investor. So to satisfy investors, Thailand started putting currency into the market. Now understand one more thing, inflation and deflation we are going to study in the later part of macroeconomics, but just to have a quick look, if Thailand government is circulating more and more money into the market, the currency exchange rate will remain fixed, no doubt. As an investor, I'll also get satisfied that my money which I am invested will have the same value whenever I'll remove from the market. So I won't be facing any loss. My motive will be satisfied, right? But people were getting more and more money in their hand, due to which. But with respect to that, the production was not increasing. If the production is not increasing, which means supply won't be there. But people are getting more and more money in their hand, which means the demand will increase. Right? If you have 5 rupees before in your hand, now you are getting 10 rupees, so obviously your demand will increase. But supply, on the other hand, is not increasing with respect to demand. Then the inflation comes into market. Hence the price rises. Price rise, which means the inflation. Alright, we are going to discuss inflation, deflation in later part, but just remember this concept to understand the South Asian crisis. Alright, so supply is not there, demand is high, so the person who is selling that commodity will try to increase the price, because more money is in the market, more money is in the hand of people, right? Now, whatever currencies, whatever investment came in Thailand government invested in construction activities, they provided loans to government and various other activities. They have not used this amount to produce a constructive manufacturing unit or to provide that money to industrialists so as the output will increase. So they have not used this amount, this foreign reserve which were coming in their nation, to a greater extent or to a good reason. Alright, so this is the root cause for this Asian crisis. When investors understood that Thailand government is trying to circulate more and more money in the market and keeping the exchange rate fixed, which will generate inflation in the market and government will collapse. So they tried to take out their money from the market. As I told you previously, Thailand government invested this money into construction sectors, into loan amount or to loan to people like a credit. Okay, in this fashion they invested the money. So it became very hard for them to return their money, and these nations went into the debt of 180% of their GDP. If suppose 100 is their GDP, suppose 100 is these countries' GDP, gross domestic products. Gross domestic product, again we are going to discuss in later chapters. Gross domestic products, which means 100 is the value of final commodity, final goods in the market. So if 100 is their GDP, they had loan of 180 rupees or 180 whatever currency. So they shifted to 180% loan amount, debt amount for these nations. Their stock market collapsed and Thailand government went into the debt due to these complete breakdown of institutional structures. Alright, so this is the complete root cause. It's very easy to understand. In this scenario, International Monetary Fund, IMF, a global organization which keeps checks on all economies across the world, came to rescue Thailand, South Korea and Indonesia, which were most affected by this crisis, and they gave bailout package of $110 billion. Alright, this amount which they have given, it's okay, but what is the major outcome of this crisis? That International Monetary Fund gave a statement or came out with a norm that no country must keep their exchange rate to fixed, and they should implement the floating exchange rate, which means that currency in circulation must be only dependent on the resources, manufacturing units and technologies and the basket of goods, the important basket of goods like gold for example, alright, what that country have, and should not completely depend on dollar, so that such kind of crisis must not take place in future. I hope you understood these concepts, floating exchange rate, fixed exchange rate, and why this crisis took place in these South Asian nations. Also understand one more irony. When we discussed about Great Depression of 1929, US economy goes down, all other economies goes down. Whereas in this case of South Asian crisis, when these economies like Thailand, South Korea and Indonesia economies goes down, IMF gives bailout package or loan to these nations, which means they'll be repaying loans in future for many years. Okay, please have a look of this image properly. It will help you understand how USA dominates the world and achieve their own interest. I hope you understood this crisis. In next our third chapter, that is types of economies, I have divided these types of economies into two parts. The first part is organizations or organizing the economies. In that we are going to deal with capitalistic economy, state economy and mixed economy. And second part or second topic, that is sectors or types of economies. The types of economies are agricultural or agrarian economy, the second is manufacturing economy, and the third is service economy. So without wasting more time, let's start with this module, types of economies. So the first topic, that is organizing the economies, and the first part of that is the capitalistic economy. Now, capitalistic economy was formed for the first time in USA. This capitalistic economy theory was given by Adam Smith. We discussed about Adam Smith in our introduction part in theories, because he is also called as father of economics, as he gave economic theory for the first time when we started dealing economics as a separate subject, right? You might be remembering about the first lecture, because we discussed this part in our first lecture, where Adam Smith gave theory about how wealth can be generated in the market. Alright, so we'll move ahead. Adam Smith in his book Wealth of Nation propounded that there must be less intervention of government in market, so that market can grow and market can decide values for the commodities. Now let me explain. First word or first concept Adam Smith used, that is laissez-faire. It's a Latin word, laissez-faire, which means less intervention of government. Adam Smith thought that whenever government intervenes into the economic affairs of any business entity, these business entities cannot grow. If these business entities cannot grow, government or growth of nation cannot take place. That's what he advocated. Later on, he told about one more concept, that is called as invisible hand in the market. Invisible hand in market. What he told about this invisible hand in the market with respect to price mechanism. He stated, in the market, price of a commodity will be decided by market forces, that is demand and supply. Let's have a quick example about this. If you require oil, or if there is a demand for oil, the supply of oil will take place. With respect to demand, the price will be decided for that oil entity. So he stated, the price in the market will be decided by market forces, that is demand and supply, and government intervention should not be there for deciding the price. Alright, so this is a simple concept he gave, and he stated business people or entrepreneurs must be the driving force in the economy. Hence we call this economy as the capitalistic economy. Alright, Adam Smith gave this theory in the year 1776. USA when became independent, that is in the year USA got independence in the year 1775. As soon as they got independence, they adopted this theory of Adam Smith. Alright, and they started following the capitalistic nature of economy. Around 1800, this capitalistic economy spread over European nations like France, Germany, UK, etc. And here this word capitalism came into the effect. Capitalistic nature of economy advocates one theory which states that the decision for how much to produce, what to produce, and at what price to sell is taken by market or private entrepreneur, and state having low economic role. What do you mean by this? Suppose if I have a manufacturing unit, I'll decide what entity I want to produce, whether I want to produce car, bike, any agricultural entity, or X number of thing. At what number, how much to produce? Suppose I want to create 100 cars, 100 bikes, that number I'll decide. I want to sell that car for 100 rupees, 200 rupees, 300 rupees, how much profit I want to generate from that, how much actual cost I got and how much profit I am gonna get is completely decided by me or a manufacturing unit, and government have no control or authority over me. So this system, this statement is advocated by capitalistic nature. I hope you understood the capitalistic kind of economy. Will be requiring these basic concepts in our future sessions. That's why I am tackling these basic concepts in the initial period, so that in future sessions you won't find difficult to understand these concepts. Alright, I hope you understood this capitalistic nature. So let's move ahead and start with state economy. The idea of state economy was given by Karl Marx, a German philosopher. Karl Marx, a German philosopher. Okay, this idea he gave just to oppose the capitalism. State economy is completely opposite to capitalistic economy. In capitalistic economy, we understood the entrepreneurs or the business entities, they have the rule or they have the power to modify or to rule the market. Whereas in this state economy, state or the government, whosoever in the power, will have the complete authority over that particular region, and they will decide what to do, what not to do. So this is complete opposite of capitalism. This idea was given by Karl Marx, and this idea came into a practical sense for the first time in USSR. USSR, which is current Russia, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. It's their previous name. And why this came into picture, have one historical event to this, that is the Bolshevik Revolution. Bolshevik Revolution, which took place in the year 1917. Now Bolshevik Revolution you will be dealing separately in your history part of UPSC, but to understand this state economy, I'll explain Bolshevik Revolution quickly. In the 1880 period, Russia or USSR, during that period USSR had a monarchy, and Tsar Nicholas was the king. But people in USSR were not happy with his administration because he was not giving that attention towards the agricultural sector in USSR. USSR by that time was mainly an agricultural economy because agricultural produce was at a great peak. Still, Tsar or king was putting a lot of taxes on these laborers and migrant workers in USSR. So they were not happy with its administrative part. By the time in 1898, in USSR there was a form of new party which is called as Republican Socialist Democratic Party, RSDP. This party was divided into two parts in 1902, which is called as Bolshevik and Menshevik. This Bolshevik and Menshevik. The word Bolshevik means majority and Menshevik means minority. But if you will see in Russian history, Bolsheviks were always in minority, whereas the name's meaning is majority, and Menshevik, whose meaning is minority, but still they were in majority. So there was one event took place in the year 1904 where Russia or USSR went into a war with Japan for the region of Manchuria. This Manchuria had a Port Arthur. On that Port Arthur, Russia wanted the dominance because that port was workable throughout the year. Russia had a port named Vladivostok, but that port was not workable in winter period. So they wanted the dominance over the Port Arthur. But Russia lost this war with Japan, and condition of laborers in Russia started deteriorating day by day. So there were a lot of protests going on by the time of 1910, 1911. I won't be explaining that part to you. But what we have to understand now, there was a protest on St. Petersburg in the year 1912, where 50,000 workers came and they protested against Tsar, that was a king. So Tsar understood. Now he had to do something to impress people and to give some assurance to them so that they're gonna get good administration from his side. So Tsar formed Duma, which is a USSR parliament where representation of these labor class will come and they'll sit in this Duma and they'll put up their problems in front of the parliament or in front of the house. But still there was one more irony, that still Tsar formed a Duma, but people who were sitting in this parliament, they were mainly capitalistic people or autocratic people who had complete authority or who had a complete dominance over people. So representation from grassroots was not given in Duma. This was an irony. By the time in 1917 Russia, right, 1915 Russia went into the war, World War I, and condition of these laborers more deteriorated. Approximately 1 crore people died in this World War I, and there was a lot of hunger. People were not having place to stay, and complete chaos was happening in Russia or USSR by that time. So Tsar understood that he can't be in a power in this condition, as people are very angry and they can kill him anytime. So he lose his power and he gave power to Mensheviks. As there was World War I going on, they didn't conduct election, and Mensheviks got power and Prime Minister was created by Menshevik group. As soon as Mensheviks got power, they arrested and kept ban on Bolshevik people. Bolshevik used to have a red army. That's the reason why you can see the color of Russia in their flag, that is a red color. So many leaders of Bolshevik, they started residing into various other countries. One of the example is Lenin. You might have heard his name, Vladimir Lenin. He was residing in Canada. Then later on, when Bolshevik came into the power, they attacked, this Red Army attacked Mensheviks, and later on they came into the power, and Lenin became the first premier of Russia, where he adopted this socialistic nature of economy. Now I have explained you this part very quickly. You can refer to other sessions and you can understand about the history of Bolshevik Revolution. There are various events to it, but I have explained you in a quickest manner so that you can understand. So Lenin came into the power and he implemented this state economy in USSR. USSR, which means that Soviet, this USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, this Soviet word means that a group of laborers. Also one more idea of Lenin, that is, he stated there must be a rule of proletariats. This word means, proletariats mean a labor class or a working class. Now when Karl Marx, when he gave the state economy or socialistic economy kind of nature economy, he stated they must be getting power in a step-by-step manner. But Lenin stated if we start getting power in a step-by-step manner to labor class, it might go ages. So we must get power with the help of militia or military or the weapons. So they got, this Bolshevik people, they got power with the help of military, also called as Red Army, and they came into the power and they implemented this state economy. This Lenin implemented this state economy. The St. Petersburg place, which is a very important place in Russia, Lenin renamed it as Leningrad, just to have one clarity. Later on again it was renamed as St. Petersburg. Currently the name is the same. Alright. So this was for the first time in Russia implemented this state economy. Later on in China, People's Republic of China, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, in the year 1949, they implemented this communism or communist kind of economy. There is a minute difference between socialistic and communist. Alright, we'll understand that difference now. In socialistic economy, they say that the part or means of production are under the government. Means of production means I have a business, I require land, that will be a mean of my production. I require raw material, will be a mean of my production. So these are called as property, and assets are the means of production, are controlled by government. and for running the economy, government will have the large part. That's what it is stated by socialistic economy. So there is no complete authority of state, but the majority, 80% authority is there of the state government. But whereas in communistic or communist economy, they state that all property and means of production, which means labor, resources, are owned by government, and state government have complete authority over the economic control. So this is a minute difference between socialistic and communist. Here there is a 80% government control, here there is a 100% government control. Alright. Now currently in this corona world, you might be listening China's name ample amount of time. There is a speculation also that as China became a communist state in the year 1949 under the leadership of Mao Zedong, by the year of 2049 they want world into the state of communism. Now this is my personal view that communism theory looks very good in books where they state that labor class must be ruling and labor class must be the dictator or the prime minister or whosoever the important member of the state government. But ultimately, whenever this labor class moves to that position, he becomes the autocrat or the leader or the entrepreneur, because without being the entrepreneur, the country we can't run the country, right? So this theory looks very good in book, but whenever it comes into a practical sense, it becomes a dictatorship. So that's the thing, this capitalistic nature, this state economy came into the picture just to oppose the capitalistic economy. Hence, capitalistic economies during that time targeted such kind of economy as state capitalism, which means state dictatorship. They targeted these economies in that manner. Okay, so I hope you understood this state economy. We'll move ahead to our third topic, that is mixed economy. In the mixed economy, they tried to achieve the center point from the capitalistic and state economy. Because understand, in capitalistic economy, completely business class had control over the economy, whereas in the state, completely government had the control. So these are 2 points or 2 final destinations of the ring, whereas in the center point we tried to capture the mixed economy where we'll have some part of capitalistic, some part of state. So this type of economy started evolving after the Great Depression of 1928. I hope you remember our previous session with respect to Great Depression. Why this Great Depression took place? Because in USA government had no control. We discussed about one cause where there was no monetary control of government, where government will keep eye on the companies which are entering into the market and how they are dealing, how they are using the money given by public, etc. So government also should have control or should have some rules imposed on the industrialists so that they'll function properly. So that's what we call it as a mixed economy. Currently, in current scenario, many nations or many countries have adopted this mixed economic type of pattern. But as soon as this Great Depression took place, John Maynard Keynes, he is a British economist, he gave this mixed economics theory in his book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, where he stated government must be targeting towards providing the basic or social goods. Social goods which mean basic healthcare facility, basic transportation facilities, like currently how we have BST buses, trains, street lights. So these basic amenities must be provided by government, and later on government must keep checks on the business class so that fraudulent activities will not take place. Alright, so this kind of nature is called as mixed economy. When India became independent in the year 1947, we adopted the mixed economic pattern. Alright, so Keynes suggested this part to capitalistic nature of economies, where he stated you need to move little bit towards the socialistic kind of economy, which means you have the capitalism, little bit move towards socialism where government will take little bit control in the running the economy. Whereas there is one more professor known as Oscar Lange, Polish economist he stated the same thing for state economy, where he stated you need to move little bit towards the capitalistic nature. Alright, so Keynes stated the same thing for capitalism, Oscar Lange stated the same thing for state economies. So from these theories, the world moved towards the mixed economic pattern, where state government and entrepreneurs started working together. Alright, now let's move to second part, that is types. These capitalistic state, mixed economy are the organizations or the organizing bodies. We define these economies into three parts based on their GDP distribution. Now, I discussed with you about GDP in short in our previous sessions. Just to understand, GDP means our final output of the country, the total final output of our country. We'll be discussing separately about GDP in future sessions. So just to understand for now, GDP means the total final output, the value of total final output, which means suppose I have a bread, I have bike, I have car. So the value of all these commodities which are sold at MRP, the final price, when we calculate, that value is called as GDP of a particular country. Okay, so if our country is agricultural economy, industrial economy or service economy, that we determine by these factors. So to have example, Indian agricultural loan in GDP role in GDP is somewhere around 17%, industrial role is somewhere around 29%, and service sector role is 54%. So whenever any country's or sector's role is more than 50%, we call that country of that type. So in this session or in this example, service economy or service sector of India having the 54%, so we call Indian economy as the service economy. Now they have another name also for these things. Agricultural economy we also called as the primary sector. Primary sector. For industry we call it as secondary, and for service we call it as tertiary. Okay, agriculture means all activities comes into this place, like fishing, mining and agricultural activities what we do on a field. So this is called as a primary sector of the economy. Industry means any manufacturing unit. In China there is a 40% role of industry. Alright, and whereas if you compare the agriculture sector of economy, agricultural sector in USA's GDP, they have 1% role, but their GDP is of huge quantity. Suppose India's GDP is 100 and their role is 17%, USA's GDP is 10,000. So 10,000's 1% is more than India's 17% of GDP. So India will have 17 rupees, whereas 10,000's 1% will be more than 17, will be 100. So they have a huge role because their GDP is also huge. So that in that fashion. So industrial we also called as a secondary economy, and tertiary in service sector, which means I am teaching to you at this moment is the service given by me. AC servicing person who comes at your place, who actually does not give you anything, but he works for you. The person who irons for your clothes is providing you service. Any maid coming at your place, she or he is providing service to you, is called as a service sector. Transport, people who are transporting goods from one place to another place, they are also providing service to some another guy. So they also come in a service sector. So India have a huge role of service sector in our economy. Alright, so these are the primary types in the economy: agricultural economy, industrial economy and service economy. I hope you understood this part. It's a bit easy to understand, right? So later on from our next sessions, we are going to understand the very important classification in our economics, that is macroeconomics and microeconomics. These are we have very important topics of economics, that is macroeconomics and microeconomics. So today we'll start with macroeconomics. I have divided microeconomics in 6 parts. As I told you previously, whenever we will start macro and micro, we will deal with Indian economics and world economics in that respective topic. Alright, so we won't be requiring to deal these Indian and world economics separately. Alright, so as I told you, I have divided macroeconomics into 6 parts. The first is terminologies, the terms which are important for us to understand in the course of action to understand the macroeconomics, right? Then we have quantitative measures of economics. Quantitative measures, which means which can be termed in numbers like GDP, GNP, etc. There are many, right? Then we have qualitative measures such as World Happiness Index or Gross Happiness Index, also we call it as Poverty Index, likewise, etc. Then we'll be discussing about Indian macroeconomic development, how Indian macroeconomic or Indian regulatory systems of economics evolved and developed over the course of time. Then later on, economic reforms and committees with respect to India again. Economic reforms such as GST, for example, the latest example, right? And there were various committees which gave suggestions to government to implement the reforms. And in the last part, we'll be dealing with world macroeconomics, where we'll be again discussing various crises which gave broader look to world about the macroeconomic development. Alright, so these are the 6 topics which we'll be discussing for macroeconomic development. And once you understand these 6 topics of macroeconomics, it will be very easy for you to understand the macroeconomic development of a particular country. Alright, so without wasting more time, let's start with our macroeconomic chapter. Now, before starting with sub-chapters of macroeconomics, first let's understand what do you mean by macroeconomics, right? As I told you previously, there are 2 broad classifications of economics, that is macro and micro, right? So macroeconomics means when it is taken economy as a broader entity. Broader entity means if government is coming out with policies for all citizens in our country, so it will be dealt as a macroeconomic policy. Whereas if we are targeting particular individual at the household, suppose if we are targeting a place having 4 or more people or a house, so if we are coming out with the strategy of, if we are coming out with a plan for them, we will be calling it as a microeconomic policy. Macroeconomic, which means when we are dealing India as a whole country and will be planning for complete India. Alright, not a specific entity, but we will be planning India as a whole entity. So it's the broader entity. Macroeconomic is a broader entity as compared to microeconomics. That's the meaning, that's the reason why we are starting with macroeconomic first, and later on we'll deal with microeconomics. Alright, so the first chapter of macroeconomics that we are going to start, that is terminologies. Terminologies will be useful for you in the course of action of economics sessions. So that's the reason why we are dealing this terminologies part at the initial period. There are total 21 terminologies. They are very easy, no need to worry. Alright, so these 21 terminologies we are going to understand one by one. Alright, so let's start with the first one. The first terminology is resources. Okay, now you might be thinking that why we are discussing about resources, but it's very important part. If you remember in our second lecture where we discussed about money and paper currency, in current scenario, paper currency is most probably and related to resources of that particular country. Okay, but one more thing which you need to understand, that's the reason why I am discussing this resources terminology in the initial part. See, the mere possession, the only possession of resources does not mean the country is wealthy or rich country, because till the time these resources don't go into the production phase and come out with some commodity, those resources won't have any value. Like for example, in African continent, countries like Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Chad, they have ample amount of resources like diamond, iron ore, uranium, like Sahara Desert, it's spread all over the northern African part. So Sahara Desert is a very good place for iron or for uranium, which is used in the nuclear power plants or for the nuclear weapons also. Alright, so till the time these countries don't have technology that can convert or that can use this uranium for power generation, this mere possession of uranium won't be useful, right? In the same way, in Latin America also, Latin America, which means the South America part, where the countries like Venezuela, Brazil, these countries come, they also have ample amount of resources such as metals, bauxite, coca beans, which you also call as a coffee, which we used to make, right? So they have ample amount of resources, these Latin American countries as well as the African continent countries. But due to the lack of technology and lack of educational facilities also, they don't have the manufacturing plants which will convert these resources into some market value, where these resources can be used by someone as a final product, right? So you can see in the world there is a disparity between these countries and developed countries like USA, UK, Japan, Switzerland. Japan does not have mineral contents or metal resources with them, but still they are developed ones. If you see UK, they have rare resources of coal, that's all, and that too anthracite coal. UK have anthracite is a kind of coal which is of highest quality, alright. But still, so to come on point, so these nations like USA, Switzerland, UK, Japan, they don't have as many resources as these African continent or Latin American countries they have, but still they are the developed ones. This is the irony, right? Why they are developed? Because the manufacturing unit in these regions are developed, their technologies are developed, education is developed, so they are the developed countries in the world at this moment without having the resources, right? So that's the reason what I told you at the first instance, the first statement, that mere possession of resources won't make your country rich, alright. These resources must go into the production phase, like iron ore in Africa in an ample amount, but still if you don't have car or if you don't have a manufacturing unit of car, how you are going to use it? The same way, natural gas is also in abundant amount, natural gas and oil, abundant amount in Venezuela and African countries also. But still, if you don't have cars on your road, where you are going to use this natural gas or petroleum products, right? So resources must go in the production phase. That's the way how your country becomes rich, which will be helpful for your macroeconomics again, alright. Now the second term is final goods. Final goods, just to give you a basic example, these are the goods which are not consumed once they are sold, or they are not used in the production process once they are sold. Which means, if I am going in the market, I am buying any vegetable, or if I am buying any bread, alright, so I am not going to going to convert that bread into some entity or commodity where I'll be going and selling that product to someone else. I'm not going to come at home, I am going to use jam, putting on bread, and will go and sell outside. As an individual, I won't be doing that part, right? So final goods are called as when somebody uses the product and this does not go into the production process. Which means when I get bread, it does not require more manufacturing, right? It's the final good. We don't have to process something on that bread and will come out with some new product in the market, right? Cars, final goods. Bicycles, final goods, right? So these are the final goods where we don't go into the manufacturing or the production process once they are bought. These final goods have three subtypes. Okay, the first one I'll be pointing it out as the third one. The first one is consumption goods. Then the fourth, as a fourth terminology, okay, Okay. The fourth one is capital goods, and the fifth one is consumer durable. Okay, we are dividing this three types into final goods itself. All right. So let's understand first, that is what is consumption goods. These three goods are final goods. All right. We are divided these three things based on their characteristic. Okay. So consumption goods. Consumption goods, best example, clothes. Okay. Clothes, vegetables, fruits. Okay. Which are consumed by individual, like us. When we go into market, and we go and we buy something, we don't think about recreating something new stuff, right? We just buy it because we want to consume that particular entity. As I give you the example of bread, the previous final good part, right? So these goods like clothes, vegetables, fruits, if you go in the market, you buy onions, potatoes. So whenever you buy these parts, what you do, you go and you consume those parts, and you make some vegetable and you eat it, right? So these are the final ones, but which are consumed by individual. Okay, again, they are not going into any production procedure, any new production procedure, or any new goods is not coming out. All right. So this is what is called as consumption goods. All right. So next one is capital goods. There are few final goods which we use in the production procedure. But in what production procedure? We create something new of some another entity. Capital goods, which means Xerox machines, right? Then you have machineries in factories which used for creating some new entity. So these machineries or Xerox machine, what I told you just now, are the final goods. But they are creating some capital. They are making something. But still they are the final goods, right? They are not going into a production procedure. Means these machines are not getting modified into something new. But they are making something. They are making some capital out of them, right? So that's the reason why we call it as a capital goods, which are used in industries mainly. Alright. And the third one is consumer durables. It is same like a capital good, but are used by a consumer. Like consumption, who is using? Individual is using, right? Like us, you, me, other individuals who are living, who are doing some another job, who are doing any job and they are getting salary, and they are using some commodities for their own consumption. Alright. So consumer durables are same like capital good. Alright. But for example, we buy TV, refrigerator, they are durable, right? You get TV and it is consumed within a day. This does not happen, right? Like vegetables. Alright. So they are durables. They last for some long time. Bike you buy, this is a consumer durable. Microwave you get, that is a consumer durable. Refrigerator, consumer durable, which is used by a consumer, which is used for a long period of time. Like capital goods. Capital goods are also used for a long period of time, right? The same way consumer durables are used. Now, there is the sixth concept or the sixth terminology, depreciation. Okay. Now understand this depreciation term with respect to capital goods and consumer durables. Alright, I'll give you example for both. Okay. Depreciation, which means, see, understand, if you have a capital good, I have an industry. I am having a machine which have a life of 10 years. This is one example of capital good. Alright. The second example for consumer durable, I have a bike which also have a life of 10 years. Within 10 years, after 10 years, its value becomes zero. That's what is the life cycle of that particular capital good or consumer durable. That's the maximum time you can use that. Alright. So if I suppose that machine have a value of 100 rupees and consumer durable, that is a bike, have the value of 200 rupees. Okay. This capital good, this machine which is used in industry, have the lifespan of, suppose, 10 years. And this bike also have a lifespan of 10 years. Alright, now to give you a best example, I'll explain you about this part. But if any one of you have a bike and car, you can see on your insurance paper that depreciated value. Each year the value depreciates of that particular commodity. So how do they decide each year how much value will be depreciated from that particular X amount of good? That's the formula. Suppose I bought this or somebody industrial bought machinery for 100 rupees. 10 years is the lifespan of that machinery. Then 100 divided by 10, which will give us 10 rupees. So 10 rupees is the depreciation value per year. Okay. So whenever that insurance company insures that product, and the same way for consumer durable, that is bike example I gave you. That is 200 rupees bike, 10 years lifespan. So each year the value of bike will depreciate by 20 rupees. Okay. So whenever insurance company insures the product, suppose you have a bike and that bike for first year you got an insurance, that insurance was completely for 200 rupees because that was the first year, no depreciation in your bike's value, because it goes into wear and tear. Wear and tear, which means you use that bike for a year, obviously its parts and engine will be used, and it won't be same like when you bought it in the initial period, right? So that's what we called as wear and tear. Wear and tear. Okay. So this wear and tear value of bike is 20 rupees. So for first year you will be having insurance of 200 rupees. But next year the value of bike will become 200 minus 20. Because 1 year you used it. So the value of bike will be depreciated by 20. Right. So it will become 180. Next year again it will depreciate by 20, so it will become 160. The same way for capital goods also. First year 100 rupees, next year it will become 90 rupees, next year 80 rupees, 70, the same way. So once you reach to this 10-year point, the value of that capital good or consumer durable becomes zero because it is consumed to its fullest. Okay, that's what its lifespan is. So these capital goods and consumer durables goes into wear and tear, and the value gets depreciated. This is what is called as depreciation value. I hope you understood this. Okay, so let's move to the next terminology, that is the seventh one. See, first is resources, then final goods, then consumption goods, capital goods, consumer durable, depreciation value, and then the seventh one is intermediate goods. Okay, intermediate goods. Now whenever you see any final good, it have various goods used in that production procedure, right? So whatever clothes you are wearing, it is made from cotton. So cotton is the intermediate good for a cloth or a final t-shirt or shirt or whatever it is. Okay. The same way steel is the intermediate goods in automobile, cars, bike, truck, etc. Okay. Copper is also a good, final good it can be, but it will be an intermediate good for a utensils. Utensil will be again a final good, but copper will be intermediate good which is used for producing the final good. So the goods which are used in the production procedure of that final good, these goods are called as intermediate goods. Alright, it's easy to understand, right? So let's move to next concept, which is bit important and will be helpful for you to understand how economy grows. Okay, so 8.1, circular flow in the economy. Okay. So to understand this part, let's have an example. Like we have firms, okay, firms, industries, alright, manufacturing unit or any firm, and we have households. Households means individual house. Okay. What does firms do? Firms provide salaries to household, right? Firms will provide salaries to you. When they will provide salaries to you? When you will provide some kind of service to them, right? You provide service to them, they make profit. From that profit, they give you salary. All right. Again, one more thing firm provides you, that is goods or products, right? Which you are only created by giving your service. They provide goods or final goods or products to you. In return, you provide spending. You spend on these products, right? So ultimately you provide spending to them, they provide good to you. So this is the circular flow in the economy, right? Firms give you salary, you give service to them. Again, they give you products, you spend on them the salary which is given by them. Ultimately you spend on these products, but it is decided by you where to expense. That's the only thing, that's the only difference, right? So this flow in the economy makes economy stronger and growth in the economy takes place. How the growth will take place? If firm starts producing more and more commodities, what you will get, you will provide more service or you will get more salary in return of that. The same way you will get more goods in the market. Alright, so your purchasing power will increase because your salary is increased, so you will expense more. That is how economy grows. You get more and more money in your hand so that your purchasing power increases, right? So this circular flow in the economy keeps economy driving. Alright, so I hope till the time we have discussed these 8 concepts, 8 terminologies, we are yet to discuss more 13. One. The first or the 9th one is the gross investment in the economy. Gross investment in economy. Okay, it's very simple term to understand. I hope you remember about capital goods. What do you mean about capital goods? The goods which will generate some value in future. They won't be consumed in a day or in a year. They won't be consumed in a small period of time. They'll be producing something, some valuable commodity they'll be producing. So gross investment in the economy, which means the capital goods which are built by government or by any entity and which are helpful for common people over a period of time, over a long period of time. To give you a simple example, our bridges is the gross investment, is the investment from our side, because bridge we construct, it's not going to collapse in a year, right? It's going to last for approximately for 15 to 20 years, and again we'll maintain it or again we'll repair it so that it can be again useful for more 10 years or whatsoever time span it have. Alright, or another example is train. It's also our gross investment. It's going to give us some return. It's not going to get consumed in a small period. So these buildings, bridges, trains, colleges, universities, so these are our gross investment which are producing some valuable commodities, can be in a quantity or can be in a quality also. Okay, can be in a both terms, not only in numbers, only in a alphabetical, only in a numerical numbers, like some amount they are going to produce. Can be in a quality or can be in a quantity also. Okay, so this simple term, this is what is called as gross investment in our economy. Okay, the next is stock investment. Stock investment. Okay, and with respect to this, we'll understand one more terminology, that is fixed investment. Okay. Now first let's understand what is stock investment. Just have a simple example. It is related with the current scenario also. Currently this lockdown period is going on, alright. So you have uncertainty about a lot of essential commodities which you are using in your house. So what many people are trying, they are trying to stock whatever is there in the market, so that they don't know if they'll get the supply of these commodities in the later period if the lockdown extends. The best example is Maggie, right? I hope you all are having a huge amount of stock of Maggie in your house. So this is the stock investment. What you're doing the stocking. Now let's understand this example with respect to macroeconomics, or in the bigger picture. Any company or firm, for example a clothing industry or a clothing factory, okay, whatever raw material they have, raw material, which means the cotton will be the raw material for clothing, to give you example, okay, whatever raw material they have, or a semi-finished goods or final good, the final good will be a t-shirt or shirt, whatever it is they are producing, okay. So whatever these raw materials, semi-finished goods or final goods they have in a year, that is called as their investment, okay. So this stock investment can be of two types. The one is opening stock and other one is closing stock, okay. So opening stock will be in the initial phase, so 1 January of a year, the first day of a year, okay. The closing stock will be counted at 31st December, okay. Now suppose the opening stock of X factory, of X clothing factory, was at 80, okay. They have 80 t-shirts with them, okay. By the end of they'll manufacture, or they'll produce more t-shirts in a year, obviously, right? They'll be working for a year. So suppose the closing stock becomes 60, okay. So this is less than 20. The closing stock is less than opening stock, okay. So this means that whenever there is a closing stock is less than the opening stock, we call it as disinvestment. Disinvestment, okay. Disinvestment means, you might have heard this terminology various times in government companies also. Like recently, if any of you following the government policies, LIC, government is going to do the disinvestment of LIC through public, which means they are going to sell their shares to public, and government will lose some of its ownership, not completely, okay. So this is called as disinvestment. So they have reduced their quantity, so we call it as a negative investment or disinvestment. Now suppose if closing stock, now opening stock was 80 and closing stock, they have manufactured more clothes and their sale was less than it would have been as compared to their production, okay. So their closing stock becomes 100. So there is more 20, addition of 20 in their opening stock, addition of 20 in their closing stock, okay, than the opening stock, which is called as stock investment, okay. So this is their investment whenever the closing stock is more than opening stock, okay. I hope you remember, this is a very easy concept. This is disinvestment whenever the closing stock is less than the opening stock, which means they have sold their products and they have less quantity with them, the manufacturing unit. And whenever they have closing stock more than their opening stock, which means they have more quantity, right? So which is called as stock investment, okay. Fixed investment means that whatever this manufacturing unit will require some machinery. We have understood about durable goods, consumer durables. What were the consumer durables? These were the commodities which will last for a long period. So the machineries which are used by manufacturing units, which is useful for the stock investment, these machineries, these durable goods are called as fixed investment, okay. I hope it's easy to understand. So the total investment of a company, which means that their stock investment can be a negative or positive. Negative or positive. Okay, stock investment plus their fixed investment. Okay, so this is company's total investment. Any manufacturing unit's total investment is their stock investment plus fixed investment. Okay, I hope this is easy to understand. Let's move to the next terminology, that is absolute advantage. Now, absolute advantage by definition means that if any individual, like any individual person, okay, if any individual, any company or any country, if they are producing any commodity or any goods at a lower price per unit as compared to some another entity or any another individual, any another country or any other company. Okay, so whenever they will produce a particular good at a lower price per unit as compared to any other person or country, then that person will enjoy the absolute advantage. Okay, understand with a very simple example. In India we have railways, local trains, okay, we have metros also, okay, but local trains are providing a very cheap transport as compared to metro. So local train is enjoying absolute advantage, correct? Because metro can't provide 5 rupees or 10 rupees, within 5 or 10 rupees fare they'll provide the travel as compared to railway is providing. Railway is providing, suppose railway is providing in 5 rupees, railway is providing 12 kilometer travel route, and metro is providing in 5 rupees will be 5 kilometer or 3 kilometer, okay. So railway will be enjoying absolute advantage with respect to metro in transportation area. Let's have another example. We discussed in types of economies, that is our lecture number 3, about communist or state economy. Okay, so China enjoys absolute advantage with respect to labor. Why? Because in China there is a communism. State controls all means of production 100%, and whatever labor also they have, it is controlled by state, right? So state government decides at what price labor will be given. As they have largest population, state government gives cheap labor. Alright. So in India, manufacturing units like Apple, BMW or Volkswagen, okay, they won't enjoy this labor advantage, because if they are getting cheap labor in China, obviously they will prefer China as compared to India, right? So China as a country is enjoying the absolute advantage with respect to labor. Okay, the same way with the Gulf countries which have ample amount of oil reserves, right? So any country, any individual or any company, if they are providing any commodity or good in a lower price as compared to any other, then they'll enjoy the absolute advantage. I hope you understood about the example of railway and Chinese labor advantage. Okay, let's move to the next terminology, that is perfect competition. Later on we'll be discussing about monopoly and oligopoly. Okay, so about perfect competition, whenever there are more sellers in a market, then there will be a perfect competition in the commodity. Which means, just understand with the example, whenever you are going in a market to purchase mobile, you have various options in front of you, right? You have Samsung, you have Nokia, you have MI, you have iPhone, then various other options currently in the market, right? So whenever there are more sellers in the market, which means there will be a competition for pricing. You might be remembering about the Adam Smith's theory, which we discussed in Capitalistic Economy, where he stated about one concept, that is invisible hand of market, right? So market will derive the demand and supply of particular commodity, which we discussed in our Adam Smith capitalistic theory, right? So the same way, whenever there are more sellers in the market, there will be a price competition, obviously, right? If Samsung trying to give you a mobile phone for cheaper price as compared to Nokia, what you will do, and with the same features what Nokia is providing, you will try to go for Samsung one, right? So these competition, these many sellers will be useful or will be helpful for ultimately buyer, right? We will be ultimately benefited by their competition, right? So this is called as perfect competition. The example is mobile, or you can get another example, that is cigarettes. There are various other cigarettes in the market. It's the demerit good, no need to worry, but still there are various cigarettes. So this is one of the example of perfect competition, because the price will be decided. Okay, monopoly, the next concept. Monopoly, which means there is a single seller of that particular good, and he'll enjoy a complete authority of that particular pricing of that particular good and selling of that particular good. This is called as monopoly, single seller market. Okay, simple example, just now we discussed in absolute advantage about railways. Railways enjoy the monopoly in the market. There is no competition for railway, right? We don't have any other service provider who is providing the same service like railways. So a railway is enjoying the monopoly in the market, right? Another example will be Google. Google have we don't have software like Google at this moment in the market which will provide us same facilities like Google. Another example, Microsoft, Adobe Reader. Alright, so these are the perfect monopoly examples where these companies enjoy the complete advantage of market. Alright, the next one is oligopoly. Oligopoly means there are not many sellers in the market like perfect competition. We have many sellers, likewise condition is not there in the market, but there are handful of sellers, like 2 or more, 2, 3 or 4, not more than that. But there is a possibility that these 2, 3 or 4 sellers, whatever they have, they can collude, they can form a union, or they can combine together and can decide price in the market. So it's the bad thing again, right? So government must have check on these handful of sellers. Otherwise, there will be a price driving mechanism for the market, so that the market will be ultimately in the disadvantage. Market will enjoy the disadvantage, and market will not be benefited. The best example is electricity. Like we have Reliance Electricity, we have Adani Electricity, we have Tata in some areas, right? So there are handful of sellers, but buyers are many. So they should not collude, they should not combine, right? Otherwise they can decide price by themselves and they can make profit, and consumer will not be benefited, right? So there are a handful of sellers, but government must have intervention. Government must intervene in their affairs, in their working, right? Otherwise there will be a high price in the market for those commodities. I hope you understood about this perfect competition, monopoly and oligopoly, right? Let's move to the next terminology, that is revenue deficit. 16th one, revenue deficit, or surplus also we call it as. Deficit or surplus, can be a deficit or can be a surplus. Okay, we'll understand it. Next terminology which we are going to understand after that, that is capital deficit or surplus. Surplus, and the 18th one is fiscal deficit or surplus. Okay, so these three terminologies are budgetary terminologies. In budget we use these terminologies. Budget means the government gives budget every year, that is on February. So in that budget, government uses these terms. Okay, so let's understand about revenue deficit or surplus first. It is divided into two parts. The one is receipts and other one is expenditure. Okay, now what is revenue receipts? Okay, this is revenue receipt and this is revenue expenditure. Let's understand, I'll tell you about this part. From these two parts we come to deficit and surplus. Revenue receipts means whenever government receives money through taxes, that is either a direct tax or indirect tax. Okay, direct tax means it is deducted from your salary directly to the government. Alright, indirect tax means the GST what we pay at this moment. GST as a separate topic we are going to cover in macroeconomics Indian part. Okay, so we pay taxes on various commodities. This is an indirect tax. Again, various manufacturing units, they pay tax, they pay GST to government. Shopkeepers, they pay GST to government, which is ultimately paid by a consumer anyhow, but still they pay to government. So these are the taxes, these are various taxes what government receive. Custom duties on airport we get. Okay, import export duties, again government receive. This is a one kind of tax again. Okay, so whatever taxes, all form of taxes, whenever government receives, is calculated in revenue receipt, or it is combined in revenue receipt. Okay, the next one is expenditure. Now whatever money government, suppose if government gets 100 rupees from taxes, okay, now government expends that amount on some part, some areas. Now where government expends? Salaries of various government servants is given by this 100 rupees. 100 rupees, which means I am giving you the hypothetical example, alright, is given by revenue receipts. Salaries of government employees, any police servant, government employee, railway employees, okay, ministers, MP, MLA, their salary is given by these revenue receipts to government, in their expenditure part. So salaries is very important part of this revenue expenditure. Okay, I hope you understand. So receipts government get from taxes, they expense into salaries of their employees, government employees. So suppose if government gives salary to their employees 110 rupees. Okay, so government received receipts of 100 rupees but gave amount that is 110 rupees, which means 100 is receipt minus 110, which will give us minus 10. So government is in the deficit of 10 rupees. Government is in the minus of 10 rupees, right? So this is what is called as, this 10 rupees is called as revenue deficit. Getting the point? Now suppose salary is reduced down to 90, or you can increase the tax also. That's the reason why government is trying to make all people into the tax system. Okay, you might have seen various unorganized sector in our economy. Unorganized sector means local vendors who are not registered with government but still they are selling. So they are not providing any GST to government. Okay, so government is getting less amount in taxes, but still they have to expense on poorer to poor section, right? But still they are not getting tax from their side. Alright, so tax can increase or expenditure can decrease anyway. Okay, so if 100 rupees and taxes expenditure reduced to 90, so government will have 10 rupees in their hand. So this time we can call it as a revenue surplus. Okay, these terms what we are understanding now will be useful for you in the later part, that is Indian economics, Indian macroeconomic development, where we are going to understand what is government's revenue deficit, revenue surplus, capital deficit, capital surplus, etc. Alright, so this is what is called as revenue deficit or surplus. I hope you understood this part. Let's move to next one, that is capital. Again in capital also we have the same thing, capital receipts and capital expenditure. Now what is government's capital receipts? Capital, which means what? You understood about this capital word, capital goods, okay, which means it is producing some investment, it's kind of investment, okay. So what will come in capital receipts? Understand in a simple term, receipts means incoming, expenditure means outgoing, right? So in receipts what will come? If government has given loan to some country, suppose government has given loan to Pakistan, which government has not given anyhow, but still in hypothetical condition. Government has given loan to Pakistan, so whatever interest Pakistan will pay to government, which ultimately they won't if they take loan, okay. So government, whatever interest government gets from Pakistan, that amount will come into the receipt part. That is the interest paid on the capital given by. Again, if government has invested their money in some business, government also have various companies, okay. So whatever profit government gets from those businesses will come into capital receipts, right? So whatever profit government get on the investment will come in the receipt part of capital, okay. Now what will be the government expenditure? Again, if government is providing any capital to someone, if loan is government is providing loan, if government creating some institute, if government building bridges, that is again a capital, right? If government, that's the, and again government get toll tax from people, that toll will come in the receipt part, right? Then government creating any institute, government creating any college, okay. So this will come into capital expenditure, right? So that we called as a investment again. And what will be capital deficit or capital surplus? The same way how we discussed about revenue deficit and revenue surplus. If 100 rupees is here, 100 rupees is expense, then we have no deficit or surplus, it will be at a balanced thing. Again, if it's, so how we will come to a formula, that is capital receipts minus capital expenditure. If it's in negative, will be in a deficit. If it's a positive, then we have a capital surplus. I hope this is clear, right? Now if you understood this capital deficit, capital surplus and revenue deficit, revenue surplus, it's easy to understand fiscal deficit and surplus, okay. Fiscal deficit or surplus. People who are following various government policies, they might have remember that government came out with policy that they want to curtail fiscal deficit to 3%, 3.5%. Okay, so fiscal deficit in simple term, that is total receipts minus total expenditure. Obviously we'll be deducting expenditure from receipts only, right? So total receipt means what? Total receipt will comprise of revenue receipts and capital receipt, right? When we combine these two, revenue receipts and capital receipts, we get total receipts of a government, right? Government will be getting money through revenue, first part, and the second part is through capital, right? And then total expenditure will be again means that revenue expenditure and capital expenditure, right? When we deduct this, if the amount is in negative, which means we have a fiscal deficit. If the amount is in positive, we are in a fiscal surplus. Okay, so understand these concepts. We require these concepts when we are understanding, we are going to understand the next chapter, that is GDP, GNP and NNP. Okay, currently, to give you a simple example, currently government have the fiscal deficit of 3.5%. Due to this lockdown period, government might borrow more amount, more money in international market. So government will have more borrowing. Now understand, if it comes into negative, which means suppose total receipts are 100 and total expenditure is 120, so government is in minus 20. So minus 20 is not the amount somewhere, right? This is not type of currency that minus 20 currency you have. So this 20 rupees is government borrowed from somewhere. This is government's loan. This is what we understand from fiscal deficit. So when we say fiscal deficit is of 3.5%, which means whatever GDP we have or whatever government's expenditure and receipts we have, the total amount we have, that amounts 3.5% government has borrowed. So whenever we'll reach to fiscal 0%, which means total receipts and total expenditure when we minus, this amount is coming down to 0. Okay, I hope you understood this part. Alright, now let's move to the next terminology. Last three terminologies we have, that is balanced budget, balance of trade, and capital fight. Okay, so balanced budget is very simple terminology. As you understood about the fiscal deficit and fiscal surplus, if government does not have any deficit or surplus, there is no deficit of government or there is no surplus, which means the budget is balanced one, which means whatever receipts government is getting and whatever expenditures government is doing is getting balanced. If 100 rupees is government's receipt and 100 rupees is only the government's expenditure, which means there is no deficit for the government, neither there is a surplus for the government. Okay, the next is balance of trade. Okay, the balance of trade is again divided into two parts, that is trade deficit and trade surplus. We have again two terminologies, that is export and import. Export means what? Whatever manufacturing units India have, if they send, suppose India have Indian mangoes are very famous outside. So India is exporting mangoes to various countries. So that is India's export. India also have lot of pharmaceutical manufacturing companies. In this COVID-19 pandemic, hydrochloric tablets government exported to various countries, because Indian pharmaceutical manufacturing companies are manufacturing ample amount of tablets in India. Okay, so they have the capability to export it. Okay, later on, import means whatever we are taking from another countries, from outside. Okay, so if export minus import is coming into negative, which means we have trade deficit. Correct? Which means we are doing more import as compared to our export. Suppose export, if we are doing 100 rupees ka export we are doing, and import we have of 90 rupees, or we have import of 110 rupees, then only we can get the negative amount, right? Then only we will get negative amount, which means our import is more. We are dependent on various countries for various commodities, and our export is not as comparable to our import. Okay. Then we have trade surplus, when our export will be more than our imports. If export is 100 and import is of 90, we will get 10 rupees positive, which is our trade surplus. Now why we are concentrating on export and import? The reason is, whenever in international market you do export or import, the amount is paid in dollar, because dollar have the value. We discussed about how dollar got the value in international market and all that in our second module. I hope you remember that. Okay, so whenever we reduce down to $10, which means if we would have had $100 with us, now we have $90, because we paid $10 extra for trade and we are left out with less $10. Here, if we are calculating, we have $10 left more. Okay, because our export is 100. Whenever people do export, ultimately they are going to also pay by dollar. The other international companies, they are also going to pay us in dollar. So we are getting $10 extra as compared to previous one. So we are calling it as trade surplus. Okay, so this is what is called as balance of trade. Okay, the last terminology of macroeconomics, that is capital fight. I'll give you a quick example so that you can understand capital fight. There was a rumor 3 to 4 years back where ICICI Bank, they told ICICI Bank is going to become bankrupt. So people whosoever having their deposit in ICICI Bank felt that their money, they won't get their money back. Okay, so what they did, they went into bank, they started withdrawing the amount from bank. So if such condition happens, bank already have invested that whatever deposits they have already invested in some other areas by giving loans to companies or personal loans or home loans, bike loans, etc., through which they earn interest. Alright, so when people go on a huge quantity and they start withdrawing their deposits, Bank don't have that amount in their hand to provide money whatever they have deposited at a single instant. Okay, so such kind of scenario where people go and they start withdrawing money from financial institutions. Okay, the same way we discussed about Great Depression, in which people started withdrawing money from stock market. Okay, we discussed about Great Depression of 1929. People who have not seen that video, again I'll request them to go and watch that session of Great Depression. Okay, so people started withdrawing money from stock market in USA. So this scenario is called as capital fight, because there is no capital left with financial institutions. Okay, so this concept, this condition, this terminology is called as capital fight in the market. Okay, I hope you understood these 21 terminologies. We require these 21 terminologies in course of time to understand the macroeconomics. Here we end with our first chapter, the first sub-chapter of macroeconomics, that is terminologies. Next session is very important because it is a very important topic, that is quantitative measures of macroeconomics. In quantitative measures, we are going to understand about GDP, GNP, national income, also at the factor cost, market price, nominal GDP, real GDP, etc. So it's a very important chapter. So please stay tuned, stay healthy, and thank you very much.